Have you ever wondered why basketball never managed to capture your attention, even though it seems like the entire world is obsessed with it? While millions fill arenas and spend hours debating teams, scores and players, you feel distant, detached, almost like an observer watching a collective trance from the outside. What if this isn't a lack of interest, but a sign of inner awakening? Carl Jung believed that what we reject or feel disconnected from often carries a message from our unconscious. It's not random, it's symbolic. Your indifference to basketball might not be apathy, but rather your psyche's way of telling you that you were never meant to follow the collective rhythm, but to listen to your own. In Jungian terms, this quiet resistance could be the beginning of individuation, the path of separating from the crowd to discover who you truly are. Because sometimes, what looks like disinterest is actually your soul saying, "This isn't where your spirit plays its game." In the next few minutes, we'll uncover the hidden meaning behind your disconnection from basketball, and why it might be one of the clearest signs that your life is guided by something far deeper than social belonging. Have you ever wondered why some people feel an inexplicable pull towards certain activities while others experience a profound disinterest? This isn't random chance. It's your psyche speaking in the language of symbols. When you find yourself consistently uninterested in basketball while everyone around you seems captivated, your unconscious mind is actually communicating something profound about your individual journey. In the realm of Jungian psychology, rejection of popular activities often signals the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming your authentic self separate from collective expectations. Your disinterest in basketball isn't simply a preference, it's a meaningful psychological response that deserves attention. The collective fascination with sports like basketball represents what Jung called participation mystique, a primitive psychological state where individuals become unconsciously immersed in group consciousness. Your ability to remain detached from this collective trance suggests that your psyche is already oriented toward a different path. Rather than seeing this as a lack, recognize it as an abundance. Your mind is preserving energy for endeavors that truly resonate with your deeper self. The archetype of rejection operates like a compass, steering you away from what doesn't serve your authentic development. When millions gather to watch basketball games, they're participating in a modern ritual that satisfies deep human needs for tribal belonging, hero worship, and witnessing symbolic battle. The fact that you don't feel drawn to this ritual suggests your unconscious needs different symbols and expressions to feel fulfilled. Your psyche isn't broken, it's actually protecting your authentic path. Jung observed that psychological growth requires periods of separation from collective values. He noted that many meaningful insights emerge not from conformity, but from standing apart and questioning what others accept without thought. Your natural disinterest in basketball could be viewed as your unconscious creating psychological space for unique development. Notice how people who love basketball speak about it, with passion, deep knowledge, and emotional investment. For them, basketball has become a carrier of psychological meaning. Your disinterest doesn't mean you lack passion. It means your passion is meant to be channeled elsewhere. The energy others invest in analyzing games, players, and statistics is energy your psyche wants directed toward different symbolic activities. Pay attention to what does captivate your interest naturally. These attractions are equally symbolic and meaningful. Perhaps you're drawn to solitary activities, creative expressions, intellectual pursuits, or different forms of community. These attractions aren't random preferences. They're psychologically significant guideposts on your journey toward wholeness. The rejection archetype also connects to what Jung called the shadow, the disowned aspects of ourselves. Sometimes our disinterest in popular activities reflects a healthy resistance to collective shadows, Basketball culture, like all sports, contains elements of aggression, dominance, and tribal thinking that your psyche might be rightfully questioning rather than blindly accepting. Remember that individuation isn't about becoming isolated, it's about making conscious choices rather than unconscious ones. Your disinterest in basketball doesn't mean you're meant to reject all collective experiences. Instead, it suggests you're being called to find communities and activities that resonate with your authentic self, rather than adopting interests simply because they're popular. Trust that your unconscious knows what it's doing. The same inner wisdom that steers you away from basketball is guiding you toward experiences that will foster genuine growth. By honoring this inner compass, rather than forcing yourself to enjoy what doesn't naturally appeal to you, you align with your true psychological needs and open pathways to meaningful development that others might miss. Every time you change the channel during a basketball game or feel your attention drift when friends discuss the latest tournament, you're encountering what Jung called the shadow. The shadow isn't just the negative aspects of our personality, it's also what doesn't fit our conscious self-image. For many people who avoid basketball, the sport actually represents qualities they've disconnected from in their journey through life. Basketball embodies physical prowess, competitive drive, and public performance. Aspects that may feel uncomfortable if your development has prioritized intellectual, creative, or introspective qualities. This doesn't mean these athletic qualities aren't within you. Jung would suggest they exist in your shadow, awaiting integration. Your discomfort or disinterest may actually be a signal that these qualities need acknowledgement rather than further rejection. Consider the basketball court itself as a symbolic space. It's a bounded arena where conflict is sanctioned, excellence is celebrated, and physical expression takes precedence over verbal communication. If you've constructed an identity around different values, perhaps valuing harmony over competition or private accomplishment over public display, the court becomes a mirror reflecting the unexplored territories of your psyche. The collective fascination with basketball can also trigger what Jung called inflation in those who identify strongly with the sport. When fans live vicariously through players, they temporarily expand their ego boundaries to include the accomplishments of their heroes. Your resistance to this process may reflect a healthy psychological boundary, an unconscious recognition that genuine growth comes through personal development rather than identification with others' achievements. Look closely at what specifically triggers your disinterest in basketball. Is it the competitive nature, the physical intensity, the cultural aspects surrounding the sport? Each element that creates distance between you and basketball contains valuable information about your psychological makeup and the aspects of experience you might benefit from exploring more consciously. Jung emphasized that we grow not by eliminating the shadow, but by integrating it. This doesn't mean you need to become a basketball fan, but rather that acknowledging what basketball represents might open new avenues for personal development. Perhaps you need to find your own arena for healthy competition, physical expression, or communal celebration, one that honors your authentic nature while expanding your capacity for experience. The shadow also contains collective elements, cultural biases, and assumptions we absorb without conscious awareness. Basketball culture prioritizes certain values: immediate results over long processes, quantifiable achievements over subjective experiences, specialization over well-roundedness. Your disinterest may reflect an important psychological resistance to these collective values when they don't serve holistic development. Pay attention to your dreams and imagination. Jung found that shadow elements often appear in dreams as figures that make us uncomfortable or situations we avoid. If basketball or related themes appear in your dreams, perhaps as missed shots, empty courts, or games you can't participate in, Your unconscious may be inviting you to engage with these rejected aspects of experience. Understanding your relationship with basketball as a shadow dynamic removes judgment from the equation. There's no moral failure in lacking interest in a popular activity. There's only information about your psychological structure and developmental needs. This perspective transforms disinterest from a social inconvenience into a valuable source of self-knowledge. The ultimate goal isn't to eliminate all shadows, but to develop a more flexible relationship with them. People who have integrated their shadows don't necessarily become basketball fans, but they can appreciate what the sport represents without discomfort or judgment. They can recognize the symbolism of the game, the skill of the players, and the meaning it holds for others without feeling threatened or disconnected. Because they've acknowledged those same energies within themselves, expressed in forms authentic to their nature. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the Sim Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. Every time you scroll past basketball highlights or politely nod through conversations about last night's game, you're engaged in something far more significant than just exercising a preference. You're navigating the fundamental tension Jung identified between individuation and collective identity. A tension that defines much of our psychological development throughout life. Basketball, like all popular sports, functions as what Jung would call a container for collective energy. When thousands gather in arenas or millions watch simultaneously from their homes, they're participating in a modern ritual that temporarily dissolves individual boundaries. The roaring crowd becomes a single organism, sharing emotions, reactions, and a common focus. This experience satisfies a primal human need for belonging that dates back to our earliest tribal gatherings. Your resistance to this collective immersion isn't accidental or meaningless. Jung observed that individuation, the process of becoming psychologically distinct and whole, requires periods of separation from collective values and expectations. Your natural disinterest in basketball might be serving as protective space where your unique psychological development can unfold without being overwhelmed by group consciousness. Think about how basketball fans often speak. We won, our team, our championship. This language reveals the psychological merging that occurs, where individual identity temporarily expands to include the team. While this can provide comfort and connection, Jung noted that too much identification with collective symbols can impede the development of a genuine self. Your reluctance to participate may reflect an unconscious wisdom about your particular developmental needs. The battle between individuation and collectivity isn't one you need to fight consciously. It's happening naturally through your authentic responses. When you feel no excitement about championship games that captivate millions, your psyche is asserting its unique path. This doesn't make you superior or inferior to basketball enthusiasts. It simply indicates different psychological priorities and developmental timing. Jung emphasized that healthy development involves both connecting with collective experiences and differentiating from them. Notice that your disinterest isn't necessarily absolute. Perhaps certain aspects of basketball culture still resonate with you, while others don't. This nuanced response reflects the complex interplay between your individual psyche and collective patterns, neither fully rejecting nor fully embracing the collective expression. Basketball's emphasis on teamwork, shared goals, and collective effort mirrors our social nature. Yet its celebration of individual stars, personal statistics, and standout performances reflects our need for individual recognition. This duality makes sports like basketball powerful psychological mirrors. Your response reveals much about where you currently stand in balancing these complementary human needs. Many people who feel disconnected from popular sports find themselves drawn to other forms of community, perhaps around creative pursuits, intellectual interests, spiritual practices, or humanitarian causes. This isn't coincidental. Your psyche isn't rejecting collectivity itself, but rather seeking forms of connection that honor your authentic development rather than requiring conformity to mainstream enthusiasms. Jung observed that psychological growth often follows a spiral pattern. We revisit similar themes throughout life, but with greater awareness each time. Your relationship with basketball and other collective passions may evolve over time. Periods of disinterest might be followed by newfound appreciation, not because you've surrendered your individuality, but because you've developed a stronger sense of self that can engage with collective experiences without being subsumed by them. Remember that individuation doesn't mean isolation. Jung stressed that the most individuated people often develop deeper, more meaningful connections with others, precisely because they've developed the capacity to relate authentically rather than through prescribed social roles. By honoring your natural response to basketball, you're not choosing between connection and authenticity. You're creating space for both to develop in ways true to your unique psychological makeup. Have you ever noticed the perfect circle at the center of a basketball court? This isn't just a design choice, it's a powerful symbol that has appeared across cultures throughout human history. Jung identified the circle as one of humanity's most universal symbols, representing wholeness, completeness, and the self. He called these circular designs mandalas, and found them appearing spontaneously in dreams and artwork during periods of psychological transformation. The basketball court itself can be viewed as a modern mandala, a contained space with clear boundaries, symmetrical design, and a central focal point. The circle at its center marks the beginning of play and the return after interruptions. For those drawn to basketball, this symbolic space provides a structured container for exploring conflict, cooperation, and excellence. Your disinterest might suggest that your psyche is seeking different symbols and containers for these universal human experiences. Jung observed that mandalas often emerge during times of psychological distress or transition, providing a sense of order amidst chaos. The predictable structure of basketball, clear rules, defined positions, consistent dimensions, offers similar psychological comfort to its devotees. If you don't feel this pull toward the structured symbolism of the court, your psyche may be oriented toward finding order and meaning through different patterns and expressions. The circular patterns in basketball extend beyond the physical court. Consider the rhythmic movement of players around the perimeter, the arcing trajectory of the ball toward the hoop, the cyclic nature of the game clock. These circular patterns mirror natural cycles we experience in daily life. Your response to these patterns, whether engagement or disinterest, reveals something about how your individual psyche processes cyclical experiences. In Jungian psychology, the center point of a mandala represents the self, the organizing center of the psyche that integrates conscious and unconscious elements. On a basketball court, all action ultimately orients around the central circle and the baskets at either end. For those disconnected from basketball, this particular symbolic arrangement may not resonate with your experience of centeredness and purpose, suggesting your self-organization follows different symbolic patterns. The elevated basket in basketball presents another powerful symbol, the goal that requires players to lift the ball upward against gravity. Jung might interpret this as representing aspiration, transcendence, and the human desire to reach beyond limitations. If basketball doesn't capture your imagination, your psyche may be drawn to different symbols of transcendence, perhaps found in art, nature, intellectual pursuits, or spiritual practices that better reflect your particular path toward growth. Jung emphasized that symbols work most powerfully when they resonate unconsciously rather than through intellectual understanding. The fact that millions find basketball captivating while you don't isn't about superior or inferior preference. It reflects different symbolic landscapes operating in different psyches. Your authentic response honors the unique symbolic language through which your unconscious communicates with your conscious mind. Notice how basketball incorporates the tension of opposites, another key element in Jung's understanding of psychological development. The constant movement between offense and defense, between individual achievement and team success, between structured plays and spontaneous creativity, embodies psychological polarities we all navigate. Your disinterest might indicate that you're working with these same tensions through different symbolic expressions that better match your psychological makeup. Basketball also contains threshold symbolism, moments of transition and transformation. The boundary lines, the free throw line, moving from defense to offense, these all represent crossing points where the game's energy shifts. In your life, you likely respond to different thresholds and transitions that hold more meaning for your particular journey. By honoring these authentic responses, rather than forcing interest in basketball's symbolic thresholds, you align with your genuine psychological process. Remember that symbols aren't static. Their meaning evolves both culturally and personally. Your relationship with the symbolism of basketball might change throughout your life as your psychological needs shift. By remaining attentive to your authentic responses rather than judging them, you maintain a valuable connection to your evolving inner landscape. This awareness itself becomes a kind of centering practice, a human-sized mandala that keeps you oriented toward genuine psychological development rather than collective expectations. Every culture throughout history has created heroes who embody its highest values and aspirations. In our modern world, athletes like basketball stars have become our contemporary mythic figures, mortals who achieve seemingly superhuman feats through talent, discipline, and will. Their journeys from obscurity to glory follow the classic hero's path that Jung identified across cultures. The call to adventure, trials and tribulations, transformation and triumphant return. Your disinterest in basketball might represent what Jung would call a refusal of the hero myth, not because you reject heroism itself, but because this particular expression of the hero archetype doesn't resonate with your psychological needs. The basketball hero embodies specific qualities: physical prowess, competitive excellence, performance under pressure, and public acclaim. If your development prioritizes different qualities, these heroes may not speak to your deeper self. Jung observed that we're naturally drawn to hero figures who embody qualities we need to develop in ourselves. Your lack of fascination with basketball stars doesn't mean you've rejected the hero archetype entirely. It suggests you're seeking different embodiments of heroism that better match your authentic path. Perhaps you find heroism more compelling when expressed through intellectual discovery, artistic creation, quiet compassion, or ethical courage rather than athletic achievement. The basketball hero's journey unfolds in public, with achievements measured in points scored, games won, and championships secured. This externalized, quantifiable heroism contrasts with more internal heroic journeys, those measured in personal growth, insight gained, or inner obstacles overcome. Your disinterest might reflect a natural orientation toward these less visible, but equally significant forms of heroic development. Consider how basketball mythology celebrates the moment of triumph, the championship won, the record broken, the perfect shot at the buzzer. Jung would note that this focus on climactic moments overlooks the equally important quiet periods of preparation, reflection, and integration that complete the hero's journey. Your psychological makeup might be more attuned to these contemplative aspects of heroism that basketball culture tends to minimize. The basketball hero also embodies what Jung called the persona, the public face we present to the world. Star players cultivate specific images and personas that become part of their brand. Your resistance might reflect a healthy skepticism about personas and a preference for more authentic expressions of self that aren't packaged for public consumption. This doesn't make you antisocial. It suggests a psychological orientation toward genuine rather than performed identity. Jung emphasized that healthy psychological development requires finding the right balance between collective myths and individual truth. When you naturally turn away from basketball heroics, your psyche might be creating space for discovering personal myths that better guide your unique development. Rather than trying to force enthusiasm for myths that don't resonate, honor this as valuable information about your authentic path. Look at which heroes do captivate your imagination, whether historical figures, literary characters, or people in your personal life. These attractions aren't random preferences, but significant psychological indicators. The qualities that draw you to certain heroic figures likely represent aspects of yourself seeking expression or development. By following these authentic attractions rather than socially prescribed ones, you align with your genuine psychological needs. The basketball hero also carries our collective shadow projections, our unacknowledged desires for dominance, recognition, and triumph over others. Your disinterest might reflect an unconscious resistance to these shadow elements, particularly if your developmental journey calls for integration of different aspects of the human experience. This resistance isn't a failure of appreciation, but a meaningful psychological response worthy of attention. Remember that Jung saw all psychological development as ultimately in service to finding meaning. The basketball hero myth provides meaning for millions through its drama of striving, failing, and ultimately triumphing. Your natural orientation toward different sources of meaning isn't a deficiency. It's a reflection of your unique psychological structure and needs. By honoring this orientation rather than fighting it, you open yourself to discovering the particular mythic patterns that will bring depth and purpose to your individual life. The journey towards psychological wholeness doesn't require you to suddenly become a basketball enthusiast, but it does invite you to understand what your disinterest reveals about your unique path. Jung emphasized that integration, not elimination, is the goal of shadow work. This means developing a relationship with what you've rejected that transforms it from an unconscious influence to a conscious resource. Begin by approaching your disinterest with genuine curiosity rather than judgment or defensiveness. What specifically feels disconnected or unappealing about basketball? Is it the physicality, the competitive nature, the cultural aspects surrounding the sport? Each element that creates distance contains valuable information about your psychological makeup and potential areas for growth. This isn't about forcing yourself to like basketball. It's about understanding what your response reveals. Jung observed that the shadow often contains not just what we reject in ourselves, but also qualities we project onto others. Notice if you attribute certain characteristics to basketball enthusiasts, perhaps seeing them as overly aggressive, simplistic, or conformist. These projections often point to disowned aspects of ourselves that need acknowledgement. The person uninterested in basketball may need to recognize their own competitive drives, physical needs, or desire for belonging expressed in different ways. Integration often begins with finding parallels between what we reject and what we embrace. If basketball's structured competition doesn't appeal to you, where do you experience healthy challenge in your life? If its physical expression seems foreign, how do you connect with your body's wisdom? If its collective ritual feels uncomfortable, what forms of community do nourish you? These parallels create bridges between conscious preferences and shadow elements waiting for recognition. Jung stressed that shadow integration doesn't mean becoming what you're not. It means expanding your capacity to engage with the full spectrum of human experience. Someone who has integrated their relationship with basketball wouldn't necessarily become a fan, but they would develop the ability to appreciate what the game means to others without judgment or discomfort. This expanded perspective enriches relationships and opens new possibilities for connection. Pay attention to emotional reactions that seem disproportionate. If you feel inexplicably irritated when basketball dominates conversation or find yourself judging basketball enthusiasts more harshly than others, these emotional flares signal shadow material seeking attention. Jung found that strong emotional responses often reveal where our conscious attitude is compensating for unconscious content that needs integration. The integration process often reveals surprising connections between apparent opposites. The person who rejects basketball's physical competition might discover they express the same drive for excellence through intellectual pursuits. The one who avoids team sports might realize they seek the same sense of belonging through artistic communities. These discoveries transform rejection from a limiting boundary to a doorway toward greater self-understanding. Jung emphasized that shadow integration happens gradually through consistent awareness rather than dramatic breakthroughs. Simply noticing your authentic responses to basketball without trying to change them creates space for unconscious material to emerge naturally. Over time, this attentiveness allows shadow elements to become conscious resources rather than unconscious influences, expanding your psychological flexibility and resilience. Remember that wholeness in the Jungian sense isn't about perfection or completeness. It's about embracing the tension of opposites that exists within every psyche. Your relationship with basketball, whether enthusiasm or disinterest, represents just one of many polarities you'll navigate throughout life. By approaching these polarities with curiosity rather than judgment, you transform potential psychological conflicts into sources of energy and creativity. The ultimate goal isn't to eliminate all psychological shadows, an impossible task, but to develop a more conscious relationship with them. When you understand your disinterest in basketball as meaningful information rather than a random preference or social failing, you reclaim the energy previously spent on judgment or justification. This reclaimed energy becomes available for authentic development, allowing you to invest more fully in the activities, relationships, and pursuits that genuinely support your journey toward wholeness. Whatever they may be,